When I was approached by PlayStation asking if I wanted to get an early copy of Marvel's Spider-Man 2, it took me all of 3 nanoseconds to say,
"Oh boy, yeah."
I mean, I love Spider-Man, I love PlayStation, and I love Spider-Man 2018, of course I was down for this. So huge thanks to PlayStation for providing me with this review code. Obviously I'm 2 weeks late to this game, but that's just because I've been busy lately. Because it's been 2 weeks, I think it's enough reason for me to be able to go over the whole game in as much detail as I see fit, so if you haven't played this game and have somehow avoided the spoilers thus far, let it be known that spoilers are going to be included in this video without any warning. Like I just said, I was really big on Spider-Man 2018 and the Miles Morales game from 2020. For the full details, you can watch my video from a few weeks ago where I covered 2018 and briefly went over Miles Morales. But the cliff notes is that Spider-Man was a game I figured I'd play because why not? I love most of the studio's games and love Spider-Man, and it's the big game this season, so I might as well pick it up. I was pretty blown away by that game when I played it then, and after several replays I can say that the game isn't perfect by any means, but it's still a good time. A solid 8 out of 10 game with a really gripping story. The Miles Morales game is pretty much the same. But obviously my expectations for the sequel were really high as early as the reveal trailer at the PlayStation Showcase in 2021. This time we're gonna play as 2 Spider-Men teaming up and taking on Kraven the Hunter as well as Venom. This game's gonna be sick! Although it was really funny how we never saw the game again for like a year and a half past the reveal trailer, so every time an article or social media post showed it, it was the same image from the trailer over and over. It became a bit of a meme and I thought it was funny and wanted to say. Whenever this game was shown, it just looked incredible. The graphics and gameplay all looked leaps and bounds better than the first 2 games, and the usage of the PS5's technology was stunning. The symbiote Spider-Man looked really fun to play as, so I was hyped. 2023 has been a year full of games released on the regular, and so many of them being critical darlings, Spider-Man 2 being another to add to the list. So with all that positive press, it begs the question, is Spider-Man 2 really that good? Spoiler alert, hell yes. It was so good that despite my owning a free copy of it, I went and bought the game anyway after finishing it. So let's start talking about what made it so great right now. This might be one of my favorite opening boss battles in any game I've played recently. Peter is starting a job as a teacher at Miles' school until Sandman attacks the city, forcing the Spider-Men to deal with him. The amount of scale and scope they fit into this boss fight is borderline just showing off. It never lets up as you play as both Spider-Man getting to grips with Peter's new robotic attachments and Miles' electricity powers, and watch the devs play around with the effects they can use on PlayStation 5. Chief among them being how the whole city is just loaded in, so they can do wild stunts like Sandman throwing Miles halfway across the city at warp speed, only for Miles to create a web net and launch himself back into the action in the span of like 10 seconds. I had the biggest grin on my face while fighting this boss fight because it was a scale that I hadn't even seen in the best of Spider-Man movies. Everything about this was just so freaking satisfying and done to near perfection. I was absolutely hooked right from the start of this game. That then sets up the story, as in typical Parker fashion, his saving the city came at the cost of his new job, getting fired right away for leaving a room full of kids unsupervised for seemingly no reason. But then that gives the player time to get into Peter and Miles' shoes as the Sandman battle has wrecked the city, so you can save various citizens by helping the police and fire departments rescue people. While doing this, you can get to grips with the basics of combat and exploration and be dazzled by what this game can do from a technical perspective. It never ceases to amaze when I play a game designed for PS5 when I see what they can do, this game being no exception. You play as the 2 Spider-Men, can switch between them in the city, and it'll take less than 5 seconds to make the switch, even when the other Spider-Man is in a completely different part of the map. You can also fast travel across New York City nearly instantly, and this map is much bigger since you can play all of Manhattan from the first game, but Brooklyn and Queens were added to the city in this game. And in one chase mission, they send Spider-Man through portals to completely different places, which was super exciting to play. Needless to say, the game's ability to load data at really high speeds is very impressive. Some players online are reporting a lot of bugs or technical issues with the game, though I should say that never really happened to me besides one where I died and the game wouldn't reload, so I had to restart the game. That happened twice, but otherwise I had no glitches I can think of. I never even saw the memed on example where Spider-Man would turn into some kind of a debug cube. But that one apparently got patched out, I think. But I witnessed it happen to a friend when he'd switch costumes over and over. But I was significantly less picky in that regard, because the moment I unlocked the Amazing Spider-Man 2 costume for Peter, I stuck to that for pretty much the entire game until I unlocked the Raimi Trilogy suit and the black suit from Spider-Man 3. I only really used the default suit for Miles, but I did play around with the Spider-Verse costumes when I unlocked them. But anything beats the new suit they gave Miles at the end. This one was just hideous how many noisy colors were going on at once. But anyway, an area this game totally shines in is how many options there are in the menu. A setting for a higher resolution and a lower frame rate, and a higher frame rate with a lower resolution, which was always my choice. Either way, the graphics in this game are absolutely beautiful. Textures, lighting, models, and effects just look supremely detailed and lifelike. And for the game to have all these visuals while swinging by at supersonic speeds is just really impressive. You can customize things like the subtitles, the usage of the controller speakers, accessibility options for players who need them, and even gameplay options for people who want to customize their experience. For example, some might have felt like the web swinging in Spider-Man 2018 was a little slow or automated, and in the sequel you get a slider called Swing Assist, which controls how automatic the webs attaching to walls is going to be. I lowered it down to 1, and that adds some extra timing to the web slinging. That alone is pretty cool, but the traversal in this game has made light years more fun than previous games from a couple of basic additions. First, while swinging you can press the triangle button, and Peter and Miles will then deploy the iconic web wings to glide through the city. With this, you get the speed to just fly through the city like you're playing as Superman or something. I already thought the swinging gameplay in Spider-Man 2018 was quick and satisfying, but this is on a whole nother level of speed and maneuverability. Nothing stands in your way when getting around the city in Spider-Man 2. You don't fall in the water in this game, you just slide along it. You can go flying by using a web catapult to instantly gain speed and start gliding. These are simple changes to the web-slinging gameplay, but really, I don't think I could ever play Spider-Man 2018 or Miles Morales the same ever again after having experienced traversal in this game. Similarly, I thought the combat got the job done in the first game, but this is also a lot better in the sequel with some tiny adjustments that leave a big impact. For starters, you don't slowly pick through a list of OP gadgets in this game. Instead, you use web gadgets with button combos that let you stay in the action more often. You still choose between using the focus meter to heal or do a takedown on enemies, but it has been nerfed to where you need to have a full focus bar to heal, which makes the combat a lot more difficult and intense. They also removed the overpowered suit attack, but instead gave Peter and Miles both these super attacks that do a good job clearing enemies. Miles retaining his electricity abilities from his standalone game and getting some new ones, and Peter getting these robotic spider leg attachments that get replaced by symbiote powers by the end of the game, which can freely be swapped once you get far enough in the story. But the real thing that changed the combat was the addition of a parry system. In the previous games, you'd dodge when the spider sense activated, but now if you time it right, you can block and counter incoming attacks, which is way more cathartic to play and makes combat a lot more engaging and satisfying. In the first game, combat was good enough, I thought, but it was also a bit obligatory at times, and I'd use things like the web blossom attack or the impact webs to make it go by much quicker. When this game got me into the heat of combat a lot more, and was something I'd look forward to doing. Especially since Spider-Man 2 really ups the enemy variety with more factions of enemies and more types within those factions, like enemies using swords and flamethrowers and such. Then I thought the kind of bare-bones stealth system of the first game was also made more interesting with this new web line gadget where you can create your own webs to walk on, which allows you to get around stealth maps more easily, giving you more options for engagement. In terms of gameplay, this is the kind of sequel that's very familiar with people who have played 2018 and Miles Morales, but also makes those games feel like a prototype with how improved the systems are. But of course, like any modern PlayStation title, the narrative is a large focus, and I think the game really delivers. I got the game a day before launch and beat it the day after launch, and in that time I'd play for hours at a time and always be hungry for more because of the gameplay, but also because I thought the story was really that well done. For starters, I loved how important both Spider-Men felt to the plot. Miles doesn't feel like a sidekick. Both of their stories up to this point feel relevant to the main story, and both characters grow a lot throughout the story. The two are different and at different spots in their lives. Peter trying to start a career and life of his own, and Miles needing to apply to colleges, and with that setup, both characters face trials that are true to the essence of Spider-Man, where they have to make difficult choices as a result of being Spider-Man. Peter getting fired from his new job within the first hour of the game because he's Spider-Man, and Miles putting off his college essay and spending time with his friends because of needing to be Spider-Man. Both characters get their own exclusive missions and side missions, so you can get immersed in the worlds of both characters. Each of the side missions also feeling like main missions in terms of story and character significance and gameplay quality, not just the bite-sized kind of filler you'd get in the previous games. The main plot sees Kraven hunting after the biggest villains in New York, and he starts by releasing them from jail. This creates a lot of drama because Mr. Negative is free, and Miles has to deal with the fact that he killed his father in the previous game. The people around him are concerned that he's out for vengeance on Martin, but really just wants to make sure he can't hurt anyone else that Miles is close to, and even comes to reach an understanding with him by the end of the story. Which was an angle of the plot I didn't see coming at all, but it made a lot of sense for all the characters involved. The story revolves around the return of Harry Osborn, as Norman using the symbiote to try and heal Harry's disease was teased at the end of Spider-Man 2018. Similar to what the writers did with Doc Ock in the first game, they made a villain twist you knew was going to happen feel really sad while you play. You know this is going to go south and Harry will turn into Venom, and that at some point Peter's going to get the suit and go rogue himself, but early in the game when Harry's using his new powers to help Peter, it's pretty cool to see these best friends able to bond over fighting bad guys together. Until Pete gets mortally wounded by Kraven and the symbiote is able to save him, which leaves Harry vulnerable to his disease again. While you have the symbiote as Peter, I love how the developers were able to put you in Peter's headspace, making the suit so powerful. Peter gets this devil trigger gauge where he can just rip and tear through bad guys more than ever before. It's a lot of fun to be Black Suit Spider-Man. This being one of my favorite visual designs for symbiote Spider-Man, as it looks like the comic book black suit, but it also looks like it's alive in and of itself, and it grows as the story goes on and Peter succumbs to its emotional toll more and more. While it's fun to be powerful with the symbiote suit at first, seeing what kind of intense stuff happens to Peter with it on just gets you eager to see it gone, which to me shows that the writers and designers are really in sync, trying to make you feel what it was like being Peter in this moment through writing and gameplay. One of my favorite moments is when Peter falls asleep and Kraven's people attack his house, but then the symbiote just goes on a rampage on its own. You have to play as Mary Jane trying to find and then trying to escape from Peter. It was really intense and compelling. In fact, I have to give massive props to the developers for how they handled these Mary Jane segments too. I would say those parts were pretty universally disliked in the first game for slowing the pace down to a crawl. I suppose it remains to be seen in a second playthrough of this game if they have the same effect. However, I just want to give praise to the game here because they could have just taken that feedback and just abandoned the idea altogether. Instead, they try to improve on them by giving MJ a stun gun that gets upgraded with different add-ons as the game goes on, and you play a simplified TPS stealth game, instead of just getting a game over the second you're spotted. It was pretty cool. Overall, I thought the black suit was going to be in the story a lot longer than it was, but they hit all the major beats with every mission, like Peter's attitude getting worse and worse with each mission, and ending with a really exciting bit of gameplay where Peter reaches peak rage when fighting Kraven, and you have to battle Peter as Miles in a struggle to get that suit off of him. This game has a lot of hype boss fights that put the new combat moves and parry ability to great use, which is another improvement over the first game. The highlight was the fight with the lizard, where symbiote Peter has to chase him down across the city in an explosive set piece, and then battle the lizard in the sewers, which actually kicked my ass somewhat. I really got wrecked during the fight between Miles and Mr. Negative though. I died multiple times because I was playing a bit recklessly, but that goes to show that I think this game's combat requires more effort from players than the first game. It helps that these are villains you get really invested in too. Up to this point, there's never been a version of Kraven that I was super interested in as a villain. Keep in mind that I don't read comics. And with that said, he really impressed me here with how ruthless he was. He's slowly dying from a disease and is looking for a foe to give him a worthwhile death, and Spider-Man and his roster of villains are who he's settled on. But he just straight up kills Scorpion in a scene, and then you find out he also killed a bunch of other villains like Shocker and Vulture too. Makes him a really intimidating presence. He finally gets that death he was looking for when Harry's at his lowest point and steals the symbiote back from Peter before he can destroy it and becomes Venom, who kills Kraven. It seems people were kind of trepidatious in the pre-release over Harry Osborn becoming Venom instead of Eddie Brock, but I think it worked out pretty well in the end. I love how Venom looks and sounds for starters, his being an immense physical threat that gets a multi-stage final boss fight that was absolutely epic to play and watch from start to finish. But narratively speaking, this more serious and sad take on Venom works well for this Spider-Man universe. Norman Osborn, like the first game, is a character I feel some sympathy for because he really does just want nothing more than to save his son by whatever means necessary. When he's researching everything he can to find a non-symbiote cure for Harry, you almost forget the fact that he's entirely responsible for almost every unspeakable thing that happened in the first game and this one as well. The villains of Spider-Man 2018 had their lives ruined by Norman Osborn, and Venom exists purely because of Norman. You can see how the whole series revolves around him and his actions, and it makes me really excited to see what they're going to do with Green Goblin and Spider-Man 3, since it seems pretty inevitable that Norman's going to be the main villain, especially now that he thinks the Spider-Men are to blame for Harry being on the brink of death at the end of this game when he asked them to save Harry from the symbiote, never bothering to wonder what role he played in his son turning into a monster. But whatever it is they do, I think it's going to be legendary. I can only imagine. But that is for the future. As for where we stand right now, Spider-Man 2 was absolutely stellar. 2023 has been stacked with great games releasing on the regular. In fact, it's hard to keep up with them all. But I do know this. In a year with many fantastic games, two of which were ones I gave glowing reviews to, I think Spider-Man 2 might take the cake for the most memorable experience I have had with a game all year. Do I think this game is perfect? Definitely not. As I've said before, I'm not sure how enjoyable it will be to play as Peter pretending to be a server at Kraven's party, or I'm sure I won't look forward to replaying Miles working at Mysterio's Coney Island booth, but this isn't the kind of thing I'm thinking about when deciding how I feel about a game. This game, while certainly not perfect, was a fantastic, unforgettable experience. What Spider-Man 2 makes me think of was how I had an absolute blast flying through the city at maximum speed. How it gave me combat I really enjoyed getting to grips with, how it got me emotionally invested in a large roster of characters who are all degrees of sympathetic at the end, just like the first game. Doing all this while making the first game, which I really liked, feel like a prototype. This is the lingering image I'll be left with whenever I reflect on Spider-Man 2. I cannot think of any higher praise I could possibly give the game under those circumstances, so to reiterate, is it actually that good? I'd sure as hell say so. I'm very much looking forward to Insomniac's Wolverine game, and I'm definitely hyped for Spider-Man 3, no matter how many years away it is. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Spider-Man 2. Glad I got to have some fun before I have to replay that one game people seem keen to hear my 1 year later thoughts on, which will be the next video. So yeah, in the meantime, that's all for today, and with that said, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.